We're looking at a 1954 Chevrolet Bel Air convertible.
Wow.
No power steering, no power brakes.
Is that 3 on the tree?
No, this got an automatic transmission. They call it a Power Glide transmission.
When was the last time being on the road actually excited you?
There wasn't a lot of safety design involved in these vehicles. They were meant to really look good, and that's it.
I don't think I'm cool enough to take a road trip in this vehicle.
When is hitting the road an adventure and not a chore? How about when you pile into the car for a family vacation?
The best vehicle for a road trip is a 1976 Chevrolet Caprice Classic two-tone station wagon.
Every family had a station wagon.
With like the wood on the side and the backward facing seats, so you can make faces at people on the road and that thing.
And conveniently, for the children, there's a cigarette ashtray right here.
You don't have to be a time traveler to relive the great Midwest road trip.
We had this car when I was in high school.
This is a 1973 Chevrolet Impala wagon. I kind of call it the prehistoric minivan.
That's it. We found it. Let's hit the road.
My mom, dad, brother, and I would load up the car. Literally, there would be no room. We would be squeezed in.
Oh, I totally remember this from when I was in high school. The clamshell tailgate.
My sister and I would always be in the back, and my mom would always make sure that we had plenty of reading materials, games, and stuff, but we pretty much just ended up bothering each other.
Always need a cooler.
We had way more coolers than I think any family would ever need.
Mom and Dad, they had to stop and buy some quarts of beer. That was important.
And then I would pack like a week in advance because I was so excited.
Swim trunks, t-shirts, shorts, that's all you wore pretty much the entire time.
He showed me how to do this earlier.
On this road trip, we'll discover hideaways for the super wealthy and the origins of some iconic local traditions.
Boil over!
We'll learn the real story behind ancient legends.
They could not find any evidence of 2,000 Native Americans starving on top of the rock.
Sail through Lake Michigan's maritime history. Remember safe havens for African Americans and Jews who were denied access to so many resorts.
I feel very safe here. You knew there was no door that would ever be closed to you here.
Ready? Discover Revolutionary War history way out here in the Midwest. And we'll live it up a little, too.
The mistake I made was looking.
So, buckle your seatbelts. Yes, cars are different today. It's Chicago on vacation.
Major funding for Chicago on Vacation is provided by BMO Harris Bank. Additional support is provided by People's Gas, Patty and Dan Walsh, in honor of Richard and Mary L. Gray, AAA in partnership with Hertz, Chicagoland Acura Dealers, the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, ITW, Joyce and Matt Walsh, and by the following.
What? Oh no. I have suspicious activity on my debit card. Now what?
You know. Oh, sorry. With BMO Harris, you can just freeze your card right from your phone.
Wow, really?
Yeah. You can unfreeze it too.
How many roommates do you have?
That feeling you get when a bank puts security at your fingertips. That's the BMO effect.
For more than 165 years, People's Gas has proudly supported the communities we serve through corporate giving and outreach, focused on community and neighborhood development, education, arts and culture, the environment, and health and human services. People's Gas. We keep life moving.
Daily commute, off the beaten path. A crossover SUV with a view, the 2019 Acura RDX is designed for road trips. With 4 drive modes and AccuWatch, adventure awaits. Learn more at ChicagoAccuDealers.com.
For over 40 years, AAA and Hertz have partnered to help travelers get places around the world or around town. Together, we are here to get you there. For more information, visit AAA.com/Hertz.
The distance of a modern-day road trip can be calculated by the number of movies the kids watch in the back seat. Our first stop is less than 1 movie away, right across the Wisconsin border. It's Lake Geneva. The excursion boats on Geneva Lake are iconic. Some are more than a century old, including Polaris, built in 1898 by a Lake Geneva millionaire. But if you take the daily 10 a.m. cruise on this boat, you'll see more than just beautiful scenery. The crew of the Walworth delivers the mail. Neither snow, nor rain, nor slippery dock. Lakefront homeowners have been getting their mail this way since 1916, when local roads were few and primitive. Today, the daily mail run is also a tourist attraction. The teenage mail jumpers also give tours between stops. Well, actually, the boat never stops.
Now, what happens if one of the kids doesn't make it back on the boat?
They get wet. I usually go back and get them.
Usually.
Today, of course, residents can opt for land-based delivery. But plenty of homes still use the boat method. Which means this cruise is also a whirlwind tour of how the 1% live, or maybe the 1/100th of 1%. Chicago industrialists started building enormous cottages, as they called them, on Geneva Lake shortly after the Great Fire of 1871. People started calling this the Newport of the West. The list of homeowners is a who's who of Gilded Age Chicago. Chewing gum magnate William Wrigley, his son, Cubs owner P.K. Wrigley, bicycle baron Ignaz Schwinn, washing machine maker F.L. Maytag, porcelain god Richard Teller Crane, and department store legend Harry Selfridge.
All those great houses are gone now, but plenty of mansions are still standing, and you don't need an invitation to get an up-close personal look at them.
This more than 20-mile-long shore path circles the lake, passing right across the front lawns of those grand homes. And by local ordinance, it's open to the public. Homeowners customize the trail, so its character changes constantly. From stepping stones to gravel, brick, and even wood. Straying from the path is highly discouraged. You can stroll past the home built for the son of Chicago meatpacker Gustavus Swift.
I guess when you spend your whole day in the stockyards slaughtering cattle, you gotta have a place to get away.
Glanworth Gardens was built in 1906. It's been home to the presidents of Harris Bank and Morton Salt and the founder of Yellow Cab. The gardens were designed by the sons of Frederick Law Olmsted.
Yeah, these aren't the Olmsteds right here.
Since 1990, it's belonged to Chicago investor and philanthropist Richard H. Driehaus. The trail was here long before the mansions and millionaires. It was forged by Native Americans, the last of whom were the Potawatomi, led by Chief Bigfoot. Non-native settlers showed up in 1831. Within a few short years, the native community was stricken with diseases like smallpox, and then one-sided treaties banished them west of the Mississippi. This sculpture by Jay Brost captures Bigfoot's sense of betrayal as he takes a final look at his beloved lake on the day he and his people were forced to leave their homes in 1836. This is the largest estate ever built on Geneva Lake, a 40,000 square foot palace erected for German-born Chicago real estate mogul Otto Young. After Young died in 1906, the 50-room, 7-level mansion became a deteriorating white elephant and was eventually converted to condos. But beginning in 2016, jet-setting Elmhurst native Tina Trahan began buying up all the condos to convert it back into a single-family home. She had the interior repainted white and added contemporary lighting fixtures and modernist furniture. Despite spending millions, she told Crane's Chicago Business, it's a bargain compared to the Hamptons. Even if the lakefront estates are off limits to most of us, there's plenty in Lake Geneva for the hoi polloi. When I was a kid, my family used to come to Lake Geneva every summer. We'd come here to George Williams College Camp. I didn't know anything about the lake's high-class history. To me, Lake Geneva was a little beach covered with toys, some rustic cabins, and the communal dining hall where I celebrated my 7th birthday. George Williams was an Englishman who founded the YMCA, and the college was used to train YMCA workers around the country. Today, it's part of Aurora University. While families like mine frolicked at one end of the lake, Hugh Hefner appealed to more sinful pleasures at the other end. Hef cut the ribbon on the decadent Lake Geneva Playboy Club Hotel, his first and favorite Playboy resort in 1968. Suddenly, peaceful Lake Geneva was hosting A-list celebrities. A private airstrip with unmistakable runway markers served regular commuter flights from O'Hare. Playboy got out of the hotel business in 1982, but the 2 championship golf courses are still here, one of which was designed by Jack Nicklaus. They're part of the family-friendly Grand Geneva Resort, which took over the property in 1994. I love the smell of chlorine in the morning.
When I was a kid, water slides weren't even invented, and now here I am at the top of something called the Point of No Return.
It's a 100-foot, nearly vertical drop.
The mistake I made was looking. Come on, give me some encouragement.
Today's kids go wild for water parks. Okay, and adults too.
The things I do for my job.
And no place has cashed in on the craze better than the Wisconsin Dells. This is the water park capital of the world. No, seriously, it's a registered trademark. There are more than 20 elaborately themed water parks in the Dells, including America's largest outdoor water park, Noah's Ark, with 3 miles of water slides covering 70 acres. Between the outdoor and indoor parks, and some that offer both, the Dells boasts more than 200 water slides and other wet wonders. Including tube rides, racing slides, wave pools, lazy rivers, surf simulators, and something I learned was called a bowl drop. It all adds up to what the New Yorker magazine calls the Las Vegas Strip for tweens. But this is just the latest incarnation of the Dells. Visitors first started vacationing here in the 1800s simply for the natural beauty. The Wisconsin River winds through deep, narrow gorges and exotic sandstone formations, carved out some 14,000 years ago as Ice Age glaciers melted.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome aboard the Yellow Thunder.
As early as 1849, visitors were taking rowboat tours to marvel at rock formations. This formation, called Stand Rock, is maybe the most famous because of a photo taken in 1886. The photographer was Henry Hamilton Bennett. The boy leaping the chasm was his son, Ashley. People thought it was a fake, but Bennett had fashioned an early stop-action shutter using a rubber band. Bennett fell in love with photography after he returned from the Civil War wounded and couldn't resume his pre-war career as a carpenter. He built a camera with 2 lenses, creating 3D images distributed around the country along with guidebooks, sparking the first Dells tourist boom.
Now, at that time in the late 1800s, not everyone had cameras like they do today.
Back at Stand Rock, the iconic jump is recreated daily. Except now, a German Shepherd has replaced Bennett's son.
All right, let's give Rocky a round of applause.
The Dells added adventure to the natural beauty with the debut of the ducks.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome aboard the original green and white amphibious duck.
No turning back now. Oh! These ungainly amphibians were built for the military by the tens of thousands during World War II, allowing the U.S. to get troops and supplies onto the European continent where harbors had been destroyed. The ducks even saw action on the beaches at Normandy. After the war, the government sold them as military surplus. A Milwaukee veteran bought one, and a friend of his dreamed up the idea of using it as a tour boat in the Dells to take advantage of higher water levels after a dam was built. Needless to say, it was a hit. Duck tours have popped up in cities from Boston to Seattle, but the Dells had the first and still has by far the largest fleet. While the ducks offer a total immersion, the Dells' next big attraction was for those who prefer their thrills from a seat in the stands. The Tommy Bartlett Show has been wowing visitors since 1953 with daredevil stunts and whatever you call this. The show's founder, Tommy Bartlett, was a master showman in TV's early days. He first saw a water skiing performance when he served as celebrity MC at the 1949 Chicago Railroad Fair. It changed his life. He convinced Wisconsin's Mercury Marine to supply boats and motors for a traveling water ski show. Early on, the show toured to the Dells, where it was such a hit that local leaders invited Bartlett to set up a permanent show there in 1953.
Well, how's everybody doing today? Let me hear you.
Over all these years, the main stage for the show has been man-made Lake Delton. Even during the catastrophic summer of 2008, after an embankment collapsed in severe storms and the lake drained into the Wisconsin River in a matter of hours. By the next summer, the breach was repaired and the lake refilled at a cost of $10 million.
Hey, heroes, welcome.
And the water skiers were back. Interestingly, Tommy Bartlett himself only water skied once in his life. He did it as a publicity stunt on his 70th birthday. He died at age 84 in 1998. But the show goes on. When the Midwest descends into the deep freeze each winter, many folks head south. Wimps. For some real winter fun, bundle up and head north. Way up north to Wisconsin's Northwoods. Eagle River bills itself as the snowmobile capital of the world. Yeah, Wisconsin is keeping the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office busy.
Well, Jeff, how did you like this?
I loved it, actually. How'd I look?
You look good. It's a colorful sled, a colorful jacket.
There is something about the styling going on here. You guys like to look good while you're doing this, you know?
I don't think they look all that good.
As long as we keep our helmets on, we look okay.
Every January, Eagle River hosts what promoters call the Indianapolis 500 of snowmobile racing. The World Championship Snowmobile Derby. Temperatures near zero didn't seem to bother these folks. Maybe the beer had something to do with it. Fans who pay a premium can watch in the warmth of indoor hot seats. The souped-up machines take to the air on a snowcross course. And they race at more than 100 miles an hour around a solid ice oval.
And that was a hard shot.
Who started all this craziness? Arguably, it was a Wisconsin resident named Carl Elison who invented what he called a motor toboggan in 1924. This is where it all started. It's lovingly preserved at his family's business, Elison Lumber, in Sainer. The vast Northwoods are breathtaking at any time of year, but they take on a truly magical quality in winter. More than 1.75 million acres of protected national and state forests, peppered with some 3,000 lakes. It's hard to believe that the logging industry virtually deforested this area a century ago. In addition to clearing trees, those lumberjacks cooked up some pretty far-fetched stories, like the tall tale of the short but fearsome hodag, which roams the forests around the town of Rhinelander.
This is a larger-than-life hodag, actually. The real hodag was, just about yay big.
Local woodsman Eugene Shepard slayed the first one in 1893 using dynamite. Then he captured a live one, which he displayed, sedated, at the county fair. But when the Smithsonian planned to examine it, Shepard admitted it was a hoax. Nonetheless, to this day, the hodag is the official mascot of Rhinelander. After the old-growth pine forests were depleted, the logging companies left, and different types of trees slowly took root, along with a new industry, tourism. Promoters billed the road from Chicago to Eagle River as the Big Fish Auto Route, luring travelers with stories of the ferocious and elusive trophy fish, the muskie.
Now this is an 8-inch hole we drilled. If I can't get a fish through an 8-inch, he wins.
Die-hard anglers don't let a little thing like sub-zero weather spoil their fun.
What, you got one?
No, I just saw it all shift a little bit. I was watching. You got to pay attention to this as you jabber, that's kind of what we do out here.
Jabbering is my career.
More than a few trophy fish end up on the walls of Wisconsin's famous supper clubs, like Al Jen's in Rhinelander.
Now, this show is called Chicago on Vacation. I'm from Chicago.
Yep.
Can you spot a person from Chicago up here?
Oh, yeah. I can't define it, but it's one when you see it.
There's no strict definition, but they're sort of like restaurants that time forgot, with flashing neon signs and woodsy interiors adorned with taxidermy. The ritual starts in the cocktail lounge with the classic supper club drink, a brandy old-fashioned sweet. Now that you've whetted your appetite, it's time to head for the dining room, where you're served outsized portions of no-nonsense fare from the days before health food. At these joints, dinner out is an evening-long affair that ends where it began, in the bar.
And here's to the supper clubs forever.
So why are these places called supper clubs when they're open to everyone? Well, it's a legacy of Prohibition, when patrons could get a clandestine drink in the dimly lit atmosphere. And frankly, the Northwoods was a bit of a hub during Prohibition. The remote location in deep forests made it an ideal place for mobsters to lay low, and they used the thousands of lakes for seaplanes loaded with whiskey from nearby Canada. The walls of the Little Bohemia restaurant in Manitowish Waters are still riddled with real bullet holes, preserved from a famously botched FBI raid on none other than John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson. Actually, some of these holes are from a restaging of the raid for the Hollywood movie Public Enemies. Despite a withering barrage of FBI gunfire, the gangsters escaped out the back. Personal items they left behind make up a chilling display even when it's not winter. Whitefish, potatoes, a kettle, and a blazing wood fire. No doubt about it, we're in Door County. This is a Door County fish boil. Now, the meal is admittedly bland, despite 2 to 4 pounds of salt. But the show makes up for it.
Welcome to the White Gull Fish Boil. I fish because I like to fish. I fish because my father was a commercial fisherman, and I got to work with my father all that time.
The moment that everyone waits for is when the boil master...
You can see right now some of the impurities on the top there.
...flings a coffee can full of kerosene on the open fire. The boil-over is more than a spectacle.
It brings all that impurities on the fish and on the potatoes, boils over all that stuff that's on top of it, and it cleans up the fish.
The main dish is served with lemon, butter, coleslaw, and bread.
It's really good. It's really good.
This no-frills meal was possibly imported to Door County by Scandinavian immigrants working in lumber camps more than 100 years ago. Between the lumber ships and the fishing boats, Door County was a seafaring place. And that history lives on in the village of Ephraim. You see the name Anderson everywhere here, as in Aslaug and Halvor Anderson, the enterprising Norwegian immigrant brothers who made Ephraim a bustling seaport. Today, many of their establishments survive as tourist attractions. Like the old Anderson warehouse, which once stored local goods awaiting shipment. It's now an exhibition space and art gallery. Famously covered with graffiti from a century's worth of visitors. Trade and travel by water was much easier than by land in Door County's early days.
I just love this big water out here, you know?
But it wasn't always smooth sailing. This narrow passage between the tip of Door County Peninsula and Washington Island links Lake Michigan and Green Bay. But it's so treacherous, it's earned the name Port des Morts, Death's Door.
It looks beautiful, but it's littered with shipwrecks. There's strong currents, rocky shores, and even fierce winds sometimes. Yeah, this is the door that Door County is named for.
A very controversial tradition along the rocky shoreline is piling up stones into little towers called cairns.
I feel like a bull in a china shop. I'm afraid if I move too far, the whole thing is going to come falling down.
Some are amazing feats of balance, but many people believe cairns damage the natural environment. There's no scientific evidence they do any real harm, but if you're expecting a lovely stroll on the shoreline, you might be pretty annoyed by all this human-made clutter. Keeping Door County clutter-free extends to the towns as well. You won't find strip malls, fast food restaurants, or big box stores to spoil the charm. It's family-run businesses in towns like Egg Harbor, Fish Creek, and Sister Bay. The commercialism here is old world style. I have to say that's the first time I've ever seen that. Yes, goats tend the sod roof at Al Johnson's Swedish restaurant.
Fainting goats are goats that if you scare them too much... Oh, you just want to explain to the folks instead of me?
The goats stop tourists dead in their tracks.
I am not a goat. These are the goats.
Listen up, boys, listen up. We've been in that swamp since the hoot owl shift. So let's clear the floor and have us some fun.
At Peninsula State Park, local history comes alive on stage 8 shows a week.
They wish they all were.
Since 1970, the Northern Sky Theater has presented original, family-friendly outdoor dramas. Like tonight's performance, Lumberjacks in Love. The troupe entertains some 35,000 people a year.
A lumberjack, a lumberjack, a lumberjack in love.
Let's end our visit to Door County where we started, by playing with fire. Ephraim celebrates its biggest annual festival by setting bonfires all over town.
The fire department is telling us all to get back.
It's called Fear Ball. It recalls Scandinavian summer solstice festivals dating to pagan times when the winter witch or evil spirits were burned. The honor of lighting the bonfire goes to the chieftain, elected each year by locals to honor his or her service to the community.
This wonderful little village represents all the things that we care about in the world.
The lighting of the main bonfire signals other townspeople along the waterfront to join in. Soon the shoreline is ringed with blazing light, and the sky erupts in fireworks. If there was ever a highway that epitomized the American road trip, it was Route 66. The Mother Road, as John Steinbeck called it, started at the Art Institute of Chicago and ended in Santa Monica, California. Kitschy roadsidea was a signature all along Route 66, competing for the attention of car-crazy Americans. Some relics are still standing, like the Gemini Giant in Wilmington, Illinois, erected during the 1960s space race to promote the Launching Pad Drive-In restaurant. Interstate highways spelled the end for Route 66 in 1985. It's now marked instead by historic Route 66 signs, but it lives on in memory. P.S. Route 66 was also a highway for Chicago clout, carrying Pauls to the state capital, Springfield. Many visitors to Springfield are short of stature and high on enthusiasm. This is a rite of passage that almost every student in Illinois has made in their lifetime. The Capitol building is so magnificent, it can make you forget about all the political squabbling inside. Maybe that was the point. Built between 1868 and 1888 from Joliet and Lamont limestone in signature yellowish color, The 361-foot dome is nearly 100 feet taller than the U.S. Capitol dome. The dome's interior was covered in soot from gas lighting for decades before being cleaned off in 1986, revealing this breathtaking stained glass oculus at the very top. As part of a renovation in 2011, these so-called maiden light fixtures were added. They were designed in the 1800s but never installed because they were thought to be too risque. The second-floor gallery honors legislators like Lottie O'Neill, the first woman elected to the Illinois General Assembly, and Adelbert Roberts, the first African-American in the state Senate. There's also this familiar face.
Even 200 miles away, you can't get away from the boss.
Because before he was enthroned as the Chicago mayor, who embodied Democratic Party power in Cook County, Richard J. Daley was elected to the Illinois House of Representatives in 1936 as a Republican. Wait, what? Seems the Republican candidate from Daley's Bridgeport neighborhood died just before the election with his name still on the ballot. Daley ran for his seat, but immediately switched parties after taking office. Even with the General Assembly in recess, there are plenty of politicians around who are happy to welcome a visiting camera crew.
Got a quick second, I will show you some real fast. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Like Illinois Secretary of State Jesse White.
I'm also the keeper of the seal. No one can use the seal without my permission.
I see it's like locked to the counter there.
Oh, yes.
And there's your license plates.
Well, let me tell you what number my plate is. The Blackhawks is number 1. The White Sox number 2.
In popularity?
Yes.
White Sox?
This former U.S. Army paratrooper, turned professional baseball player, turned teacher, and now longtime politician, gave me an impromptu tour of his modest corner of the State House. As old as this Capitol building is, there's actually an older one in town, dating from 1839, called, not surprisingly, the Old State Capitol. But history was still being made there on a frigid day in 2007.
And that is why, in the shadow of the Old State Capitol, I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
Barack Obama chose this backdrop for his message of national unity, because it was here that another tall, lanky Illinois politician launched his political career 150 years earlier with his famous speech decrying a house divided. Abraham Lincoln moved to Springfield in 1837 to try his hand at lawyering. He was so broke he had to ask for credit at a local store to buy sheets for his bed. If you want a deep dive into the life of Lincoln, Springfield is the place to go. The Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum opened in 2005. You can take a virtual visit to the White House, visit the log cabin where Lincoln read by firelight as a child, witness the great debates, and survey the battleground at Gettysburg. There are also precious archives off limits except to scholars and researchers, and the occasional TV host.
Oh, wow.
What do you think? Can you make out the first line?
70 years ago?
Does it give you chills?
It does.
Yeah. It's the Gettysburg Address written in Abraham Lincoln's hand. And people come from all over the world to our museum and they stand in front of a piece like this. And I've seen people cry because of the context of a piece like this.
Mr. Lincoln, of course, was a lawyer. He was a politician. What's he trying to become in 1860? President. So he's campaigning.
Nearby, you can visit the only home Abe ever owned. The Lincolns spent 17 years here.
Mr. Lincoln put his hand on that rail every time he went upstairs, so when you guys do, it's kind of like shaking hands with him. When you think of the Lincoln Lincoln's story, you need to always remember the part that took place here in this house. Mrs. Lincoln said the happiest years of their life were right here. This is where they were truly a family.
Lincoln said farewell to his beloved Springfield at this train station. My friends, no one not in my situation can appreciate my feelings of sadness at this parting. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return. Lincoln did return to Springfield, but not in life. His tomb sits atop a hill in Oak Ridge Cemetery. Its obelisk rising 117 feet. In the marble and bronze interior, a cenotaph rests atop his burial vault 10 feet below. Mary also lies in the tomb, along with 3 of Lincoln's sons who all died in childhood, reuniting a family torn apart by so much tragedy. Just a few hours north from Springfield,
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
is a landscape that sure took me by surprise.
Look at this.
At Starved Rock State Park.
Starved Rock in October, and there's a waterfall.
Illinois flatlanders are often amazed to learn there are actual canyons in the state, carved by erosion through St. Peter's sandstone, a soft, porous rock. If you enjoy these dramatic canyons, you can thank the Illinois River, which was itself formed by a catastrophic event geologists call the Kankakee Torrent.
Kankakee Torrent. 18,000 years ago, there was an ice sheet here coming out of Hudson's Bay. 16,000 years ago, it started to melt. The park was left with 18 canyons.
The erosion also left a series of high bluffs overlooking the Illinois River. In fact, that's the Starved Rock. The rather grim name comes from a Native American legend about war and revenge. During a battle between Native American tribes, a band of Illinois took refuge atop the rock. Advancing Potawatomi and Ottawa warriors surrounded the rock, cutting off their food supply. According to legend, the Illinois died of starvation.
Archaeologists were last here at the park in 1981. They could not find any evidence of 2,000 Native Americans starving on top of the rock.
That's park guide Lisa Sons. She's been leading tours of Starved Rock for 20 years.
How would you fit 2,000 Native Americans?
That's why we call it the Starved Rock legend.
While archaeologists haven't found evidence to support the legend, they've unearthed a treasure trove of artifacts that tell of Native American occupations dating back more than 10,000 years. At the Starved Rock Visitors Center, relics from the reign of Louis XIV are remnants of Fort St. Louis, which early French explorers built atop this strategic overlook in the 1680s to defend against British incursions into the region. The park we enjoy today grew out of a more recent historical event, the Great Depression of the 1930s. Starved Rock was among many natural areas all over America where FDR put people back to work as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps. Here, they forged trails, built bridges, and shelters. And most spectacularly, the enormous lodge with its massive stone fireplace. While the human history is fascinating, our guide Lisa is most excited by the natural wonders to see and to avoid.
So whenever you see a vine, if it's hairy, don't hug it.
Don't touch. Oh, hey, boy or girl. So that water coming out of the canyon there looks orange. Is it polluted?
No, that is iron that's oxidizing one of the minerals that comes out of the sandstone.
It's rusting.
Yep.
Best of all, Lisa told me why leaves change color. The trees are shifting their energy to store up sugar for the long, cold winter.
This time of year, the trees stop producing chlorophyll. Since that chlorophyll is being pulled away and it's not being produced, the green is fading, and the yellows and the oranges have always been present, but now they have a time to show. This is a young shagbark hickory, and it's already starting to turn yellow.
Yeah, we're getting some yellow there.
Those carotenoids.
Lisa grew up hiking in this park, so she especially loves giving a new generation of nature lovers their first glimpse of starved rock.
All this school group coming right here.
Yes, this is the season for school groups.
Do you think about, these kids being like you when you were a kid, coming here and maybe getting the bug?
I do. I think about that every single time I take a school group out. I feel like I'm planting a seed. Whether they choose to nurture that seed or not, I feel like they're still walking away with an appreciation.
It's a beautiful day for a battle. Especially since no one gets hurt. It's family friendly.
Let's start the bidding at $30.
And afterwards, there's cake and a pie auction.
Dixie, sold. You want me to hold it for you? Okay. Good night and God bless.
Ma'am, you're under arrest.
Sir, what on
Ma'am, you're
earth?
under arrest.
What on earth are you doing?
Well, okay, there is a little bit of drama.
It is a lie, I am telling you. This is absurd. I thought this was a town of genteel, friendly folk.
This way, ma'am.
It's just your typical old-fashioned public arrest and trial for the attempted kidnapping of a Civil War general.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant, Mrs. Rose Greenhow, is guilty of plotting to kidnap General Grant and hold him hostage.
This is how every year the birthday of Ulysses S. Grant is celebrated in his adopted hometown, Galena, Illinois.
Thank you.
People call Galena the town that time forgot, because much of it looks the same as it did in Grant's day. And even more so each year during his birthday weekend.
Across the street, we have the Dowling House. Built in 1826, it was actually finished in 27. It's the oldest house in Galena open to the public.
The general himself and other costumed reenactors stroll the streets. And visitors can tour the house the city gave to Grant as a gift, fully furnished, when he returned triumphant after leading the Union to victory in the Civil War. Grant commanded a regiment of miners from Galena, which in those days was a lead mining boom town. The miners helped capture Vicksburg, Mississippi by digging tunnels and detonating explosives under the enemy lines. The Union flag, proudly raised over Vicksburg, was brought home to Galena. It's on display today at the Galena History Museum.
So people don't usually get this view. They actually opened the case for us. Think of the hands that held this in the Civil War, the soldiers that raised it after the battle. This thing right here.
The museum prizes this famous painting of Lee's surrender at Appomattox because in addition to Grant, 3 other generals in the painting were from Galena. When Grant decided to run for president in 1868, he chose Galena's DeSoto House Hotel as his campaign headquarters.
It will be my endeavor to administer all the laws in good faith.
The day after the election, Grant stepped outside to address a crowd celebrating his victory. "I leave here tomorrow," he said, "but it would give me great pleasure to make an annual pilgrimage to a place I have enjoyed myself so much." Galena force winds. Into every road trip, a little rain must fall. But hey, that's what museums and gift shops are for. So why is so much of Galena still intact from the 1800s? Well, a lot of the credit and the blame goes to a humble mineral, lead.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that felt good. We've all heard of the California gold rush, but decades earlier, fortune seekers flocked to Galena to get rich from lead in America's first mineral rush. In fact, Galena is the Latin word for lead sulfite. It's not as glamorous as gold, but lead was used in everything from ammunition to solder, pipe, and pottery glaze. The lead mine exhibit at the Galena History Museum is about as real as it gets. This is an actual abandoned mine shaft that was discovered out behind the museum. That's a mannequin, not a real actor. Up through the 1840s, Galena was bigger and more important than Chicago. And the Galena River, which flowed 4 miles to the Mississippi, was jammed with riverboats, making it the busiest port between St. Paul and St. Louis. But by the end of the 19th century, industry shifted from lead to steel, and mining waste had silted up the Galena River so it was no longer navigable. Galena's boom went bust.
Galena has been called the town that time forgot.
By the 1950s, it had become almost a ghost town. 2 decades later, artists and locals began to realize the value of a streetscape almost preserved in amber. Over 85% of Galena is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And beyond Main Street, many mansions that once belonged to riverboat captains and mine owners have been beautifully restored. Today, nearly 1 million visitors come to Galena every year. Another big draw in this area is the beautiful rolling terrain. Why is it so hilly here? Well, because the Ice Age glaciers that flattened most of the upper Midwest somehow missed this region. Geologists call it the driftless area. The topography is also great for something else you don't see a lot of in the Midwest: skiing. This is Chestnut Mountain, if you can call 475 feet a mountain.
I haven't skied in 15 years. What could possibly go wrong?
What Chestnut Mountain lacks in height, it makes up for in trickery. At a so-called terrain park named Farside.
All right, should I just go?
The half pipe is fun to watch, but I'll stick to downhill skiing. The Rockies might have the tallest mountains, but these slopes offer something skiers can't get anywhere else. A sweeping view of America's mightiest river, the Mississippi. Before there were road trips, Chicagoans had another way to go on vacation. Towel? Check. Sunscreen? Applied. Extra in the backpack? All-important beach chair? Check. I got a train to catch. The South Shore Line to Indiana is the last of the electric interurban railroads, sort of a cross between streetcars and intercity trains that had their brief heyday in the 1920s and 30s. You could board the train in downtown Chicago and an hour later disembark in a landscape that felt worlds away. To attract vacationers, the South Shore Line promoted Northwest Indiana as a paradise with romantic posters and vacation packages. And the star attraction was Duneland, the Indiana Dunes. Who could feel anything but awe for the breathtaking Indiana Dunes?
You know, there was a time when this whole shoreline was thought of as just really a barren wasteland, perfect for steel mills and oil refineries.
Thankfully, a University of Chicago botany professor saw something different. Henry Coles identified this as one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Coles pioneered the science we now call ecology. An article he published in 1899 brought international attention to the dunes. But Coles wasn't the only one interested in this lakeshore. Heavy industry began bulldozing the dunes to build steel mills, power plants, and ports. A relatively small portion of the dunes was set aside as a state park in 1926. But the destruction continued outside the park for decades. Finally, the grassroots Save the Dunes Council emerged, led by a former schoolteacher named Dorothy Buell.
I would like to see the steel industry give.
With help from U.S. Senator Paul H. Douglas, they won their battle to create the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore in 1966. As a compromise, industrialists got the Port of Indiana at Burns Harbor, which opened in 1970. Although industry has stopped altering the landscape here, visitors have unwittingly caused dramatic change to the highest dune, Mount Baldy.
This kind of gives you a picture of what Mount Baldy has moved for in the past 10 years, a little after.
Beachgoers have trampled grasses that hold the dune together, allowing the wind to literally move it.
So she just explained to us, this dune is moving. The wind is blowing it, and it's going to eventually cover that parking lot over there, completely cover it.
Messing with Mother Nature can have dire consequences, as we learned on a hike with National Park Service Ranger Kelly Cadell.
All right, guys, welcome to the top of the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore area of Mount Baldy.
For decades, running up and down this dune was the highlight of a visit here. But lurking beneath the surface is danger. In the summer of 2013, a 6-year-old boy was swallowed up by a sinkhole while climbing Mount Baldy with his family. Miraculously, he survived for hours until rescuers managed to dig him out. Researchers found the sinkhole was caused by decaying trees buried in the sand.
We didn't know about this until that day. It's brand new to science.
Mount Baldy was immediately closed, and scientists began mapping its internal structure with ground-penetrating radar.
All right, guys, if you want to move up like 30, 40 feet, I'll be right with you. I'll get to close the gate behind us.
Today, the only access is with a park ranger on a guided tour. This startlingly pink house, perched atop an old dune right in the middle of the national park, looks like it was magically transported from Florida. Actually, it was brought here by barge from Chicago, along with several other homes. They'd been displayed at the Chicago World's Fair of 1933 to demonstrate how technology and new materials would revolutionize home construction. The so-called House of Tomorrow had air conditioning and a garage for your airplane. When the fair closed, developer Robert Bartlett floated them across the lake to be showpiece properties in his resort community of Beverly Shores. Next door to the national park, this old lighthouse is a monument to the earliest settlers who dreamed of building a bustling port here in Michigan City. Early lighthouses needed live-in keepers so the oil lamp wouldn't burn out or stop turning. The longest-serving lighthouse keeper here was a woman named Harriet Colfax. She held the post for 43 years, living in the lighthouse with her lifelong companion, Anne Hartwell. The community fondly called them Anne and Tat. Well into old age, Harriet continued to tend the lighthouse and a second light at the far end of the pier before finally retiring at age 80 in 1904. Just outside the lighthouse is a memorial to a shipwreck that happened in Chicago. Why? Well, Michigan City was the scheduled destination for the steamship Eastland on July 24, 1915. But the ship rolled over on her side in the Chicago River, trapping many passengers below decks. The memorial anchor chain has 844 links, one for each person who died in the disaster, the worst in Great Lakes history. Michigan City is best known for another lighthouse, the Lighthouse Outlet Mall. But what most bargain hunters don't know is that this mall rose from the ashes of a vast railcar factory. The Pullman Standard Factory produced thousands of freight cars a year at its peak. It was shuttered in 1970 and almost totally destroyed by fire in 1973. The outlet mall opened on the site in 1987. You'll find many buildings designed by Frank Lloyd Wright's son, John Lloyd Wright, in the lakefront neighborhood of Long Beach. To get your bearings here, you'll need to know the unique local form of navigation, the stops. Natives might tell you a particular beach or landmark is near Stop 15 or by Stop 24. The stops are a holdover from a long-defunct bus route that used to serve this area. At each stop, there's public access to the beach. You know, once in a while on vacation, it's good to just do nothing. I'm roasting myself here. Jeez, who made this fire?
That's probably how Portillo's got started.
Of all the places Chicagoans travel on vacation, none has a truer Chicago endorsement than Grand Beach, just over the Michigan state line. Because this is where Chicago's mayoral dynasty, the Daley family, has had a retreat for generations. Like the Daleys, many in Grand Beach and nearby communities are South Side Irish.
Well, they call it, Geoffrey, the Irish Riviera. It's not can, but it's similar.
Uh-huh. South Side Irish Riviera.
The South Side Irish Riviera.
You know, we must be living a charmed life as a production team. It was raining all day today. We really didn't know if this beach scene was going to work out. Look at this. We got a beautiful sunset. It's been raining all day. Sometimes the vacation gods smile upon you. Some road trippers don't have to worry about finding a place to stay. They bring their lodgings with them. Well, I've been filmed in a lot of vehicles over the years. A Model T Ford, a Model A Ford, a Packard, a mint green Plymouth Savoy. That was a sweet car. But this is the first one with indoor plumbing. For these travelers, the word campground doesn't just mean tents and campfires. It's where you park your RV or trailer and settle in with all the comforts of home. All right, he's waving me in. So is she. I can sort of see her. If I land in the creek, I've gone too far. I did it. These campgrounds are like small towns where everybody knows everybody. Except the entire population and all the houses change every week. This kind of camping can be traced to the auto campers of the early 20th century. They just found a scenic spot by the roadside and pitched a tarp between trees. But soon, there were accessories like tents that unfolded from the car, portable appliances, and seats that converted into beds. And before long, roadside campgrounds offered water and toilets, grocery stores, and even laundry service. Many of the families camping around Lake Schaefer, Indiana, are here for a different kind of wildlife.
This is called a unicorn roll-up. It's ice cream wrapped in cotton candy. That's American ingenuity.
Indiana Beach Amusement Park can trace its history back to the 1920s when a dam built on the Tippecanoe River near Monticello created the Twin Lakes Schaefer and Freeman. A furnace company executive named Earl Smackman bought some of the newly formed lakefront property and realized he could build a beach and charge people to swim. The beach opened for business in 1926 with a refreshment stand and rowboats. You could even rent wool bathing suits. Over the years, a dance hall and thrill rides were added. Spackman's son took over and brought big-name rock music acts in the 1960s and 70s. A whole generation of TV viewers remembers the low-budget ad campaign for Indiana Beach that coined the phrase, "There's more than corn in Indiana, Indiana Beach on beautiful Lake Schaefer, Monticello, Indiana." New Buffalo has been called the gateway to Michigan, with a welcome center hyping the state's many wonders. At the dawn of the automobile age, New Buffalo was the gateway to nearly impassable roads of rutted dirt and sand. But by 1922, a concrete highway called the West Michigan Pike extended from the Indiana state line all the way north to Mackinac City. And at least one early roadside restaurant is still going strong.
I'm on the list. Oh, here comes some more.
George and Gladys Redemack opened a small concrete block tavern and hamburger joint on Red Arrow Highway in 1946. The present owners were such fans of the place that George and Gladys agreed to sell it to them in 1974.
I got the famous burger. Isn't that what it's called? Wait a second.
Legendary.
Thank you. I got the legendary burger.
AKA the hamburger that made New Buffalo famous.
And you said you're 61?
61.
So you started coming here when you were 10?
10. Well, see, being a local here, everybody knew everybody in families.
This area bills itself as harbor country. The charming communities here like New Buffalo, Union Pier, Lakeside, and Three Oaks are just close enough to Chicago for weekend country homes. And some of them are modern gems designed by notable Chicago architects like Dan Wheeler, Stanley Tigerman, and Margaret McCurry. Owners of second homes in the country make good clientele for upscale antique shops, restaurants, and this distillery in Three Oaks. It occupies a former buggy whip and corset factory built in 1888 by a staunch prohibitionist who must be rolling in his grave.
Everything's transferred into the pot of the still. We heat it anywhere from 170 to 190 degrees. What that does, it turns the alcohol into a vapor. Those vapors are then collected in the top portion of the pot, which we call the whiskey helmet. All the vapors are then transferred into the two columns, removing any impurities that might be left in the spirit. Everything with the still comes off that pipe. Everything is clear and 180 proof.
Woohoo!
And oh yes, there's a brewery in a former church in New Buffalo. The beer list is of biblical proportions.
The one that's turned out the best, I think, is Pontius Pilate. You can always tell who's Christian or not by how they order the beer. If they say Pontius Pilate, they're Christian, they came up in the tradition and they are very comfortable with the name. If not, they think that it's the father of Pilates. So they call it Pontius Pilates, and they think that it's the father of Pilates.
This part of southwest Michigan attracted middle-class travelers in the early 20th century. And parts of the area were free of the restrictive covenants that excluded Jews and African Americans.
I know my father has always been kind of a trailblazer. As I've gotten older, I have realized that we were the benefit of being one of the original owners up there.
When you went to Union Pier, you always felt safe. You had no concerns about the kids. They could ride their bikes up there, and you felt a source of freedom and that you never get in the city.
In Benton Harbor, there's an old amusement park that volunteers are bringing back to life. They've got the train ride running again, so you can take an eerie journey through the crumbling remains of Eden Springs. Built by an apocalyptic religious group called the House of David. The members lived communally with their charismatic founder, Benjamin Purnell, and his wife, Mary. They were all celibate and never drank, swore, ate meat, or cut their hair. But they had no objection to financing their community with a beer garden and amusement park for outsiders. But what people remember most is their barnstorming baseball team. They traveled the country playing to sellout crowds who came to see the long hair and beards and stayed for their all-star talent. That's Babe Ruth outfitted for a special guest appearance. The House of David was tainted by scandal in the 1920s when Purnell was accused of sexual misconduct and convicted of fraud, causing a split in the community. Eventually, the celibate members grew old and most died off or left. Today, on a field where the old ballpark once stood,
Hey, batter.
locals and visitors play baseball with vintage equipment in honor of the long-haired sluggers of days gone by.
There you go. Good one.
I suppose we're going to have to chase it.
Somebody ought to go out there so he doesn't have to chase him.
For visitors, the Silver Beach Carousel in St. Joseph is a fun fantasy ride that lasts a few minutes. But for the community of St. Joseph, it's the realization of a decades-long dream. It's a tribute to a cherished merry-go-round that spun on the waterfront for more than half a century at the old Silver Beach Amusement Park, which closed in 1971. The original carousel had 44 horses, hand-carved by a master craftsman. After the park closed, the carousel was sold and shipped out of state. The community effort to buy it back fell through, so St. Joseph raised enough money to build a new carousel. It opened in 2010 with a menagerie of fantasy creatures, each custom designed and funded by a different sponsor. The Carousel's band organ is an original from Silver Beach Amusement Park, donated back to St. Joseph by a local buyer after passing through owners in 3 different states. It plays on as the carousel spins, creating cherished memories for generations to come. Southwest Michigan is wine country. Thanks to Lake Michigan's moderating effect, the local climate here is ideal for growing true European grapes.
Clearing the palate.
But this climate is also ideal for growing many other kinds of fruit. And even if wine snobs turn up their noses.
Oh, I totally know that flavor. Passover from my childhood.
Local wineries and customers from far and wide go wild for fruit wines.
Oh, there is a spice in there.
Yes.
Clove?
Yes. See?
I could be a
You're
sommelier.
getting good at
Fruit is definitely big business in Michigan. And small business, too. If your family's like mine, no road trip is complete without a stop at a farm stand.
All right, it's the honor system. 3.
And sometimes, we just skip the middleman entirely. The big crop around South Haven is the humble blueberry. By some measures, Michigan is the leading blueberry producer in the nation. Like many towns on the Michigan coast, South Haven was once a bustling port.
And set the main!
The tall ship Friend's Goodwill is a replica of a merchant ship that sailed these waters and was captured and eventually burned by the British during the War of 1812.
Put your left hand on your hip. You have to look.
Oh yeah, I gotta look nautical.
There you go.
This ship is just one of many impeccably restored or recreated vessels at the highly respected Michigan Maritime Museum. South Haven was once called the Catskills of the Midwest. Jews built dozens of resorts here because, like African Americans, they were excluded at many vacation spots. It started in the early 1900s with Jewish farmers renting rooms to vacationers. Tourism proved more profitable than farming, and soon there were more than 60 all-inclusive resorts, like Mendelssohn's, Weinstein's, and probably the most famous, Feidelman's. People dressed to the nines for dinner, danced to famous big bands, and laughed at or heckled the comics. By the 1970s, restrictions had been outlawed, and most of the resorts were gone or no longer predominantly Jewish.
You got one on there, Ken?
Ken on WTTW.
Now, I'm a seafaring guy, but a few miles up the shore from South Haven is a kind of vessel I've never seen before. Locals claim it's the last surviving chain ferry in America.
Coming here, this is where it's starting to pull on that chain on the end.
Wait a minute, this is like Tom Sawyer. He's roped me into doing this entire thing. I'm like almost there. We were only gonna go halfway.
There's no steering mechanism. The hand-operated vessel just follows a chain that's cranked up from the bottom of the Kalamazoo River.
Oh, man.
Here in Saugatuck. The Saugatuck area has a long history as a safe haven for gay travelers. Dunes Resort in the neighboring town of Douglas is touted as the largest gay resort in the Midwest. It opened in 1982. But accounts from as far back as 1897 describe what is now Oval Beach as a nude beach for men. In fact, nude sunbathing continued near Oval Beach on a private dune until 2011, when it became public land and nudity was prohibited. In the 1960s, the Blue Tempo was a gay-friendly bar, even though, incredibly, Michigan law actually prohibited serving alcohol to homosexuals. A weekend bartender there named Carl Jennings later founded the Dunes Resort, which he eventually sold to 3 longtime patrons. Do you feel a little bit like you're carrying the flag for your community here?
I want to think the Dunes will be here for, forever. I feel like we are not the Dunes. The Dunes is an institution. When it's time for us to go,
Here's to Colin's birthday.
the Dunes will still go and somebody else will take on the leadership.
Saugatuck is also a place for artists, especially ones who really want to get away from it all. The campus of Oxbow Institute is really a jumble of shacks and rustic buildings surrounding a rundown old hotel. Everywhere you look, artists have left their mark, which gives the place a kind of magical quality. 2 artists from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago founded Oxbow in 1910. At the end of each session, the class buries a time capsule in the form of a grave marker. After touring this place, I can only imagine what they've buried. None of these tombs has ever been exhumed.
If you look up for a moment, everything above is on a roller bearing.
It turns.
Okay, it turns.
If you want to meet an authentic Dutch miller and learn how to grind wheat in an authentic Dutch windmill, you'll have to go to Holland.
Look how far you already turned it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So now you see why I don't have to go to the gym.
Fortunately for us, that means Holland, Michigan.
So this is where the grain goes when I'm ready to mill.
Meet Elisa Crawford, the only Dutch-certified miller in the Americas and the only woman in the Grain Millers Guild of the Netherlands. Elisa was born and raised in the U.S., so to pass the rigorous examinations, she had to learn to read and write Dutch.
The AKG,
which means?
The Traditional Corn Millers Guild, or Grain Millers Guild of the Netherlands. So it's a very elite group.
The nearly 200-year-old windmill is also one of a kind. It's called De Schwan, and it once stood in the Dutch town of Winkel. It was damaged in World War II, and there was no money to repair it. Holland, Michigan asked the Dutch government for rare permission to move it overseas. They promised they'd restore it to working order and allow the public to watch it in operation. And by 1965, it was back in action here. Holland is more than a windmill. Visitors can take a deep dive into all things Dutch at Nellis's Dutch Village, where, yes, they make and wear wooden shoes.
Sort of the opposite of soft shoe.
These are called klompen dancers. The buildings represent architectural styles from all over the Netherlands. Holland really was founded by Dutch immigrants seeking religious freedom in 1847. It's never good to be in distress at sea, but I guess if it has to happen to you, the best place is Grand Haven, Michigan, aka Coast Guard City, USA. The title Coast Guard City was bestowed by an act of Congress in 1998 to recognize Grand Haven's special appreciation for their local coasties. After seeing them handle this 47-foot motor lifeboat, I'd say there's plenty to appreciate. Maybe the biggest tourist attraction in Grand Haven is its famous musical fountain. It's been spouting since 1962. Synchronized to music and lights, more than 1,000 nozzles shoot water formations like the fan-shaped peacock, the wave, and the helix. Let's hear it for DNA.
This is the pump room. We have our pumps and our motors, as well as all the valves that go outside to the fountains.
The inner workings of the fountain are almost as amazing as the show. Some performances involve up to 17,000 computerized lighting and water cues.
Can I do it?
Yeah, go ahead and start 3, but don't hit 2 until I tell you.
Jeez, the whole place like shakes.
Go ahead and press number 2.
That was not a sound effect. That really happened.
And then press number 1. There you go, and it's running.
Grand Haven's fountain was built by volunteers and funded with donations. The original pumps are still operating. They were salvaged from Grand Haven's water treatment plant, and the lights were surplus from the local airport. Nearly 100 years ago, serene Silver Lake, with its beautiful dunes, charmed an 18-year-old homesteader named Mack Wood. He built a vacation paradise here, and then he invented a hair-raising, stomach-churning adventure he called dune scooting. Today, Mack Wood's grandchildren run the business with a fleet of modified SUVs that float above the sand on slightly deflated airplane tires. But it took Mack a while to perfect the technology. He started in the 1930s with Model A Fords. They often got stuck in the sand, but Mack was a man with a vision. He scoured junkyards and rigged up contraptions with as many as 10 tires.
How many are going on this for the first time? Raise your hands. Quite a few of us. Actually, my second time, they're giving me another chance.
The Silver Lake Dunes became a state park in 1951. The state limits dune scooting to a 7-mile trail to help preserve this precious ecosystem. It's quiet today in this national forest east of Ludington. But decades ago, these woods echoed with music from the top African-American performers in the country, entertaining vacationers in Idlewild, Michigan. Idlewild was called the Black Eden, and for African-Americans, it really was a kind of paradise, where they could enjoy the great outdoors free of discrimination, threat, and exclusion.
Our parents, when they brought us to Idlewild, they knew we would be okay.
When you got up here and you met somebody, it was like family.
And you knew there was no door that would ever be closed to you here.
For African Americans in the early and mid-20th century, the Great American Road Trip was not so great. There was actually a guidebook that helped them find restaurants, gas stations, and motels where they wouldn't be turned away. It was called the Negro Motorist's Green Book, named for former postal worker Victor Hugo Green, who published it from 1936 to 1966. Idlewild was founded in 1912 by 4 white couples who saw a business opportunity to cater to African American travelers. Vacationers could rub elbows with black intellectuals, enjoy outdoor fun, and especially the nightclubs.
Do you know what Idlewild stands for? Idle men and wild women.
Ironically, it was the civil rights movement that brought an end to Idlewild's glory days.
Once it got where we could go other places, we wanted to experience that, so that's what we did, and Idlewild was just kind of left.
The clubs and other attractions closed, and the once booming resort was all but abandoned.
I've lived other places, but Idlewild, this is my home. This is the only home I've had my entire life.
Today, a handful of residents remain, and there's renewed interest in preserving this critical part of Black history. Sunrise over the Leland Peninsula.
So I'm not a morning person, but this is pretty great.
But cousins Joel and Eric Peterson don't have time to admire the view.
What else is down there that people wouldn't know about?
This is the start of their workday as commercial fishermen, and there aren't many of them left on Lake Michigan.
How long you been doing this?
Eric and I are 4 generations.
4 generations? Yep. 4 generations?
4th generations.
Our vessel, Joy, is one of just 2 remaining fishing tugs out of Leland, Michigan. This morning, Joel and Eric are hauling nets full of whitefish.
Whoa, that's huge.
They're required to throw back anything else.
Is that a trout?
That's a trout.
Look at that thing.
And they can't keep whitefish that are too small either.
This guy's too little.
Oh, yeah.
It's your lucky day, buddy.
Native Americans have fished these waters for centuries. When non-native settlers arrived in the 1850s, fishing became big business. A collection of docks and shanties called Fishtown at the mouth of the Leland River was home to many commercial fishing operations between 1900 and 1940. But after that, the fishery declined due to invasive species, overfishing, and other factors. Today, the weathered shanties once used for net mending, ice, and storage are home to businesses that trap more tourists than trout. But it's also still a working fishing village. Today's catch will be processed and smoked at Carlson's, now in its 5th generation in Fishtown.
All right, you're all set. Thank you. Yep, have a good day.
Carlson's gets a lot of credit for saving Fishtown. In the 1970s, they bought up many of the defunct shanties and rented them to shop owners. Fishtown is now owned and maintained by a nonprofit preservation group.
1, 2, 3, boom, 1, 2, 3.
How serious is Leland about its fishing history? Well, this is the only place I know where you can get a Bloody Mary garnished with a smoked chub. Oh. Out there in the mist, a few miles off Leland's shores, the North and South Manitou Islands are bear cubs. Their mother is the towering Sleeping Bear Dune, forever watching over them from shore. According to a tragic Ojibwe legend, the mother and her cubs tried to swim across Lake Michigan to escape a forest fire in Wisconsin. The mother bear made it. The cubs drowned, and the Great Spirit turned them into islands. Sleeping Bear Dune at its highest point is 450 feet. The dunes and the islands were designated a national park in 1970.
You know, I actually come up to Michigan every year with my own family, and we kind of have a family joke that we don't tell anybody where we're going because we don't want to spoil it. Oh well.
I guess it's no secret, really. The park gets over 1 million visitors a year. Have you ever wondered how cherries are harvested? Me neither. But if you did, you probably didn't picture this.
Who knew?
Farms like this one, owned by the Schooks family, yes, that's really their name, make Michigan by far the largest producer of tart cherries in the United States. Michigan also produces a large percentage of America's sweet cherries, especially in the region around Traverse City. For cherry pie lovers, a trip to Traverse City is like a pilgrimage. Bakeries, like the Grand Traverse Pie Company, can hardly make them fast enough. Of course, Traverse City hosts, what else? The National Cherry Festival. It's held every year around harvest time in July. There's a cherry queen,
Happy Cherry Festival!
cherry princes and princesses,
On your mark, get set, go!
cherry pie eating contests for kids
Come on, baby!
and adults, and the obligatory cherry pit spitting competition. And of course, there's a farmer's market selling every kind of cherry food and beverage you can imagine. And some you can't. No. So far on our journey, we've gone to some of the most visited Midwestern vacation spots. Now, let's crash a more secluded hideaway. The yachting life for me. Too bad it's not my boat. You can spot mega yachts you'd expect to see in Miami or Saint-Tropez in the hidden harbors of Petoskey, Harbor Springs, and Charlevoix. The lumber port of Charlevoix became a retreat in the late 1800s when religious groups and university professors built several private communities here. Later, steamships began regular service for summer visitors. Some houses in town look like they were built for hobbits. These structures, sometimes called mushroom houses, are the work of a one-of-a-kind architect named Earl Young. Young was an architecture school dropout who designed dozens of homes around Charlevoix starting in 1918. He didn't use blueprints. Instead, he would just draw the floor plan in the dirt on the home site. He insisted on supervising workers in the placement of every stone and window pane. He built fireplaces and walls from stones he found and stockpiled, like this humongous boulder. I feel like I'm in Citizen Kane in the Weather Vane restaurant. If you visit Charlevoix, I hope you like petunias. They line the main drag from one end of town to the other. More than 1,000 volunteers plant them each year. And they're watered every day by the son and granddaughter of Dale Boss, who dreamed up Operation Petunia in 1982 as a way to beautify the town. For the last stop on our road trip, we need to ditch our car because we're going where automobiles are not allowed. Mackinac Island. That's the mighty Mackinac Bridge. When it opened in 1957, it was the world's longest suspension bridge, and it's still the longest in the Western Hemisphere. Its towers are 50 stories tall. It links Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas, but it doesn't go to Mackinac Island, hence the ferry. The island's main drag at rush hour, 19th century style, is long on quaintness. The historic storefronts peddle trinkets, t-shirts, and fudge.
Can I get a plain chocolate?
Lots of fudge. In fact, the locals call the tourists fudgies. This particular week, the fudgies are almost outnumbered by 10,000 sailors. celebrating the finish of the annual Chicago to Mackinac race,
Hey, congratulations, first overall. Let me see that again.
the world's oldest freshwater sailboat race. All right, enough with the drunken sailors. Most of the island is a well-preserved wilderness, and to tour it, we hop a 2-horsepower taxi.
There's so much that goes into driving a carriage that most people don't realize. Like taking care of your own team of horses, for example. Every driver is responsible for brushing, harnessing, and washing their team of horses every morning, and then tucking them in for bed at the end of the night as well.
Our 19-year-old driver, Faith Champine-Roos, is one of the island's 600 year-round residents.
So do you love horses?
Absolutely. When my dad moved up here when I was 8, that's like every little girl's dream, for their dad to move to an island covered in horses. Are you kidding me? Absolutely.
Long before the island was a vacation getaway, it was a Great Lakes outpost for Native American trade and French missionaries. Historic Fort Mackinac was built during the American Revolution by the British. Okay, I'm supposed to keep it pointed up. British and American troops even fought a battle here during the War of 1812.
Ready? Fire!
After the war, the island became a hub for the fur trade, but by the late 1800s, it had become a hideaway for wealthy industrialists. And nothing says Gilded Age like the Grand Hotel. It was built by railroads and cruise lines in 1887. Maybe you remember Esther Williams making a splash in this scene from the 1947 Hollywood musical, This Time for Keeps. The hotel claims to have the longest porch in the world, 660 feet. And you won't see t-shirts and shorts when the guests gather before and after dinner. There's a strict dress code. I confess, when I was packing for this trip, I didn't think I'd be needing a tie. I hope nobody catches me. So, why do we have such fondness for road trips? Maybe we love the places we visit that have kept their local character alive.
What's so special about it for you?
Even though I get bored and I want to go away, I want to go elsewhere, it keeps drawing me back in.
Maybe it's the adventures we remember best.
You say I look good.
You look good.
Maybe we love the history.
I have children, and I think they've had a wonderful life, but I don't think they could come near the childhood that I had.
The stunning natural beauty. And who can resist the one-of-a-kind characters?
Berichten voor de molenaar.
Messages for the miller.
Exactly.
In the end, we love road trips for all those reasons. And most of all, sharing these experiences with our loved ones.
The lasting memory of all of these trips is the devotion of my parents to the family.
Kind of whatever we experience together as a unit.
That kind of togetherness with your family, you just don't get that exact kind of thing back.
My wife passed away last year, so it's more important to me even now to be there with my kids.
For all these reasons, the cherished memories live on in our hearts long after the journey ends.